So I just wanted to kind of take this opportunity to say thank you to Dr. Miranda and everyone up at TAMS. It's been amazing. It's been a long road for the last 9 years, but I can't believe that we're here. And I'm really excited to kind of give this presentation to y'all about test taking strategies, right? Something that you guys are going to have to do forever, basically, in your whole life. So this is just kind of like an objective slide. About a little bit more about me. I was a TAMS student in 2009 to 2011, graduated with a Gold Cord Award for community service and leadership. And then I was also a junior bio tutor, along with a lot of research that I got to do at TAMS. I went on to UT Dallas, so stayed close to home there in Dallas area, majored in biology with a minor in business administration. And it was a National Merit Scholar with a full tuition scholarship through the college-sponsored merit program at UT Dallas. During my time there, I had a lot of good opportunities for research, including the Green Fellowship up at UT Southwestern. And then I was also a tutor and a TA, which for this kind of presentation, makes me kind of pretty well prepared for this whole situation to be able to kind of give a talk on this. So after graduating from UT Dallas in 2014, I went on to UNT Health Science Center, which is a program that has master's programs and PA and physician programs too, but I did the master's in medical sciences, which is a 1-year master's to prepare us for medical school. So after that, I got into medical school, graduating technically this May, but now we've officially been considered graduated. So I'm going to be a first-year resident at Phoenix Children's Hospital down in Phoenix, Arizona. I guess my hobbies, I just wanted to put it on there. I love to teach. Obviously, that's why one of the reasons why I'm going into pediatrics. And outside of school, when I do get that little bit of free time, I like to cook and crochet. So this is, why are test taking strategies so important, right? And a lot of schools, I think even now in undergrad, are hopefully kind of talking about how to take test taking seriously and how to do well on tests. But you're stuck with tests for the rest of your life, no matter what career you choose. Unfortunately, exams are part of that career, no matter which one you go into. And so identifying the issues that cause test anxiety and that cause you to not do well on tests can actually help you do a lot better in future exams. One thing that I always have to remember is that your support system is the main kind of going to be your helping stone. And so if you always remember your motivation for why you're studying and why you're working so hard when the rest of your classmates are out having fun, then you can kind of keep yourself more motivated to keep on studying. So my own personal experience, so I grew up with severe asthma and, with asthma, stress, anxiety, stress is part of that response. And so I was actually used to carrying my inhaler with me to tests, but eventually I realized that was kind of going to be impossible because going into medicine, there's a lot of big tests that come up and there's a lot of stress and anxiety involved with those testing encounters. And so I had to come up with my own ways to kind of calm that and make sure that I was able to do well. So there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of me having to talk to advisors and to see, what I can do to better study for tests. And one of the ways that I found, and these are just my things that work for me, and I think that these things do work pretty well for other people too. It's just you have to tweak it to your own strategies. So whenever you go to college and grad school and onwards, every exam has a set block of PowerPoints and every exam has that a set block of test questions. And so those PowerPoints are a lot of information a lot of times. So for me, it was really important to try and see what was the most important piece of information from this slide to prepare myself for what the test question could ask. Another thing that I learned is kind of psychology of taking tests is that most people, when they look at a question, they know the answer in 15 to 30 seconds. If it's easy, if they know it, they'll know the answer within that time limit. If you don't know between that time limit, then you're less likely to actually remember the correct question, the correct answer, and you're more likely to confuse yourself and kind of spiral down. So one of the things that I learned, even in this is kind of later on for me in medical school, was to, if I didn't know the answer, I would skip it, I would mark it, and then move on and come back to it at the end of my test. Um, Now, every test will be timed in college. That time limit sometimes varies from 2 minutes to a minute and a half or even less, right, for graduate school as you kind of go on in your education. But just because there's a time limit doesn't mean that you have to use every single second of that time to answer those questions. So what I would do is actually kind of time out my whole exam. And so if I, knew 60% of the questions, I would only spend 30 seconds on each of them and then have that time remaining to go back to the difficult questions. This seems like a really easy strategy, but it's actually not, because you have to get out of the mindset of answering every single question in order, and actually focus on reading the question first. So I also learned to take a lot of breaks. I learned that my own attention capacity is about 20 minutes. So after about 10 or 15 questions, I cannot focus on the questions, and my testing kind of anxiety and stress level increases. And so for me, even on these big tests like the step 1 and step 2 exams for USMLE, I would actually take a break every 20 minutes, because if the whole section is 60 minutes, I would take about 2 or 3 breaks and just breathe and stop looking at the computer for 1 second, and kind of focus on what I do know so that I could reset my mind. And that worked for me. And I think for a lot of people, it works, especially as your burden of studying gets bigger. You have to learn to control that overwhelming feeling that happens a lot better. So this is, a complicated slide. I'm sure y'all have seen these kind of slides in PowerPoints and TAMS, and then this that never goes away during college, right? There's a lot of text. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of break this down, right? So this is just like some text about test anxiety, okay? It talks about things like, fear of failure and catastrophizing during testing situations. And so it's just simple information about test anxiety, but it's a lot of words, right? And so what I would always do, this is something that I tell my students when I tutor too, is to, when you see a slide like this, take the second that you're listening to the professor to kind of highlight some words or some things that the professor's saying. So in this case, I've already kind of highlighted or bolded the words for you. But if I were to say while presenting this slide, research shows that high levels of emotional distress have a direct correlation to reduced academic performance, then that out of all the words on that slide, that's the most important thing that I want to convey to you. Now, hopefully, as professors in school or get better at trying to understand how to best portray information to students, they realize that this is not the best way to do that. But unfortunately, this is still going to be a reality that you have to see. So we just wanted to kind of play this game real quick. It's called Kahoot. It is a free online game that helps you kind of have a little competition and some fun too. So let's see. So if y'all want to go on your computers or your phones real quick to this Kahoot website and enter the code, that'd be great. It's about test anxiety or test taking problems. So all of these are correct answers because they're all kind of common things that happen with test taking. And like I said, one of the biggest things is when you see a question and you don't know the answer, it's very easy to spiral down into that next level of anxiety and saying, well, if I don't know this answer, how do I know the answers to the rest of the questions? And so to do really to kind of control that is one of the biggest things about test taking problems. Let's see. So we'll try the next question. Hopefully y'all can see it this time. So whoever did that one question, Zany Bear, you're the leaderboard right now. Okay. So what is the first thing you should do when you study for a test? So this is my answer choices. Yay. All right, we got some answers. Okay. So I thank you for the shout at your friends. I hope that would bring some laughs into there. But yeah, shout at your friends. That happens. Definitely done that sometimes because studying for tests is hard. But making a study plan is usually the first way to go when you have to study for a test, right? And this includes whether you're studying for the unit exam at the end of the chapter block, or if you're studying for a big exam like the MCAT, right? Eating brain food. So I don't know if anybody knows some common brain foods, but typically they're the more healthier kind, not as much chocolate, sadly, but studies have shown that if you eat dark chocolate, it does tend to help. So hopefully people can use that as an excuse to go eat some chocolate, chocolate covered fruits or something there. All right. So now everyone is on the leaderboard. All right. So how do you remember a wealth of information, right? All right. So thank y'all for participating again. So notes, I know a lot of people say like that's the most kind of automatic thing that you do, but notes are not a great way to actually remember all of the information because as your tests get harder and more vast, you can't write down everything that the professor is saying. And the fact is that professors' PowerPoints are not going to have uh, all the same information that's going to be on the test. So the biggest thing is how to actually apply those concepts. And the three correct answers in this case are, practice questions, flashcards, and mind maps, right? So mind maps, I'll show you an example later on in my PowerPoint, but they're actually really kind of very colorful and easy ways to divide up the material that you're trying to learn. And so I think it helps our brains kind of take in all this information and kind of create pathways in our own mind of how to connect that information to concepts. Practice questions in college, they used to be not really available, but now most books when you buy will come with practice questions. What I've actually seen in college is that a lot of professors have those practice question Q banks that they buy when they buy the instructor version. Those questions are pretty similar, if not the same, as the ones that are accessible to students. So if y'all can spend that extra, few dollars and get a new version and get a version that has a practice test bank, it's actually going to be more beneficial to you Otherwise, you can always do what I did, which is the old school way. I actually would go through my PowerPoints and create multiple choice questions. It took significantly longer than just studying notes from my PowerPoints, but that was one thing that actually did work for me. But in medical school, we have practice question cubing, so it became a lot easier to kind of study from that aspect. So flashcards also talk about another kind of some cool ways that you can use flashcards to study later on. But flashcards are great at making sure that you can remember a lot of information. All right. So next question, what is the best time to study? All right, wow. So only one person chose the right answer. So right after class, there's a big issue with that, right? Because y'all are gonna go to college, y'all are gonna be in classes for a minimum of 4 to 5 hours a day. That's exhausting for the human brain. That's exhausting, right? All of us have good times that we are good at kind of focusing and studying the most efficiently. And actually, right after class is not a good way to do that. What is a good way to do that, especially if you have morning classes, is to take a little break in the middle and then start studying. Then, of course, if you are a person who likes to study at night, then you can actually kind of nap during the day a little bit more and study at night, because we all have hours of our days when we're better at studying. The biggest thing to remember is always be able to give yourself breaks, because I've been in those situations where you have so much material to go over in one day. It feels overwhelming and it feels like I don't have enough hours in this day to study this material. And the fact is that if you give yourself those breaks during the day, even if it's every 20 minutes you're getting up and you're walking around or you're watching some Netflix or something, that will actually end up being a lot better for you in the long run than sitting for 2 or 3 hours straight trying to study something. Okay, and this applies to whether you guys are in college or when you go to your next big exams. All right, so next question. Which of these is true about the COVID-19 disease? I threw in some COVID-19 questions just to see how much y'all know, but hopefully to kind of give information about test taking strategies too. All right, yay. So it is spread by contact droplet precautions. That's why when everyone talks about PEs right now in the news, the PPE that has to be used is a gown and mask and gloves and everything. It is not spread by airborne. I know that's been going around. And I think people confuse that because TB, which is airborne, we use the same type of mask, which is the N95, but for COVID-19, people are using the N95s because it is one of the best ways to prevent that virus from getting inside. So hopefully everyone knows what contact droplet is by now, but if y'all don't, because y'all might be confused with the different kinds of information that are going out in the news. Contact means that if you touch a sick surface, if you're sick and you touch a surface, then there's a likelihood that the person who touches that surface next can actually get infected with COVID. If you see the little graph that or the picture that I use, it tells you that things like cardboard and stainless steel and plastic are the virus can survive on that for a very long time. That's why we call it droplet and contact precautions. So this example in relevance to test taking strategies is that this is one example of something that you can use to kind of draw out information from a slide. So if there's a really complicated slide, like one of my first slides that you weren't able to see, unfortunately, was this big ICU one pager that was created by an ICU doctor in who kind of shared it for everyone's personal use. And it's great because it offers a very good, succinct summary. Now, obviously, it's a very complicated slide. So I would sometimes do these, even if it involved drawing or mind maps or whatever, to kind of summarize that information down to what you really need to know. All right. Good job, everyone. Thank you all for participating. Okay, so when you feel stressed about studying for a test like the MCAT or the GRE, what are you going to do? Right, yay. So thank y'all for getting the correct answer there. And remind yourself why you're doing this. That's a pretty important scenario, right? But also asking for help is really important. I know some of y'all, y'all are going to be stressed out and always worrying about tests. But asking for help, Wendy and Russ and everyone in TAMS is always heavily involved in your career and making sure that you're well prepared for it. And it's okay to ask for help. Even when you go to college and even when you go on to things like medical school in my case, or graduate institutions, you're always going to have a support system around you. Whether that support system is your parents or your friends, or whether that support system is the school psychologist who helps you study or helps you work through everything else that's going on in your life. These are really big exams, the MCAT, the GRE, USMLEs. They're big exams, and nobody warns you about the amount of stress that you have studying for those tests. So it's really important to know to ask for help. I hope all of you have seen with the COVID situation that people are giving out their cell phone numbers and saying, hey, text me if you need some help, if you need some emotional help. There's the suicide hotline. There's a lot of ways to ask for help. All right. So next question, how long does it take to learn concepts from a 45-minute lecture? All right, yay. Thank you for whoever chose the right answer. That's perfect. It does take about 3 hours to learn. It takes about 3 times as much time to learn the concepts than it does to actually go through the concepts, right? One of the biggest things that we learn in medical school is because we are forced to sit through 8 hours of lecture a day. This actually means a long time. This means you have to use a little bit of pre-preparation, go in beforehand, before the night before, and go through ways that you can remember those questions, remember those concepts. One of those ways for me was I would kind of print out like a version of the PowerPoint and already kind of go through and annotate those slides with what I thought was pretty important. And then I would kind of check myself during the day when the professor was actually lecturing and telling us that information to see how I was actually doing with identifying the critical points of that article. But y'all are right, it does take about 3 times as much to learn. All right. Elated Cheetah has the highest answer streak. Wow, good job, guys. How do you identify the most critical piece of information in the busy slide? So this is an example of that one pager that I gave you. This is a very complicated slide, but Right, yay. Exactly. So both these yellow and green, both these answer choices are perfectly correct. Like I've mentioned a couple times before, your professor is going to tell you exactly what he wants you to know as long as you're listening for it. Especially in a busy slide, there's so much information that you have to kind of cultivate from it. So trust the professor when they say that, you know, when they repeat a thing a couple times or when they highlight something on that slide, it's probably going to be on that test. And graphs and pictures are a great way of identifying critical pieces of information because a lot of times for the human mind, they're easier to process than reading a bunch of text. A lot of the mistakes that I see, you know, my students make when I tutor is people tend to go to textbooks. If they don't understand the information in the PowerPoint, they tend to go back to textbooks. And that often doesn't work for a lot of people because the textbook has a lot of information, and a lot more information than you're going to need to know for the test, right? So you're actually wasting your time by trying to read the information in the textbook rather than focusing on what's in the PowerPoint or whatever lecture your professor is giving to you. So writing down anything, it's always a bad idea. So thank you for not choosing that because there's always going to be a lot of information that, you know, you're going to have to end up writing down if you choose to go that path. All right, good job, everyone. So more COVID questions. Where did the COVID virus come from? All right, thank you. I'm glad you all got that right. That was a piece of information on that complicated slide that we showed earlier. But thank y'all for getting that right. Yes, no pigs, fish, or chicken were involved in the transmission of this COVID virus. All right. So what population is at highest risk of contracting COVID-19? All right. So healthcare providers, I put that on there. I know we forget about us a lot of times, but we are involved in the front lines. Everyone from EMS to nurses to custodians to physicians are going to be at a high risk of contracting COVID-19. I'm sure you all have seen the situation that is going on in the hospitals right now, and we don't even have the equipment to protect ourselves. So infants are a rare group because a lot of times they are the most affected, right? Whenever you hear of things like the flu, usually infants and little kids will end up being affected a lot more. In this case, for some weird reason, COVID-19 doesn't really affect infants as much. It does affect the pediatric population, which is where I'm going to go. But mostly the main three people of patients who are at higher risk of contracting COVID are these three groups. All right, so which state has been the hardest hit so far with the COVID-19 outbreak? There's a little graph for y'all. All right, thank y'all. So I just put this in because I think it's important for people to learn how to look at graphs, and I think that's an important way to try to synthesize and cultivate the important information. And it's a cool way to spread some knowledge about COVID. All right. So last question is kind of just a fun question, but congrats on being TAMS students and TAMS staff. But what are your quarantine plans? Yeah. All right. Study. Well, nobody. That's a sad plan a little bit, but that's a good plan. Studying is important. So I'm glad that nobody chose junk food, but I'm glad that it's kind of sad that nobody chose spending time with family, y'all. That's the most important thing that hopefully COVID should teach you is to take each day and live it to the most that you can. So I'm just gonna Just going to show you who won. So thank y'all for participating. I'm sorry for the problems that we're having, but I'm going to switch back to this screen, and hopefully y'all should see my screen, my PowerPoint. All right. All right. So this is just to kind of review some study strategies that are good to use. You know, a lot of people are visual, right? Y'all learn with different colors and different colored pens. The nice thing about having technology on board nowadays is there's so many different apps and different things that you can use. I just suggested a couple of them. IdeaMent is an app on Apple where you can make really cool mind maps. And Nebo is what I use for my Microsoft computer. And it's a free app by Microsoft, actually, where you can draw your own little mind maps. And so this is just an example of a mind map that I used to organize all this critical information, because when you see it in text, it's a lot of information. So if it's audio, if you learn audio visually or audio using kind of the sound of the lecture, you can record the lecture, listen back at your own pace, right? Sometimes that means going at 1.5 speed, and sometimes that means going at a slower speed than what the professor's saying. And flashcards are really awesome. So Anki is something that's been coming up more and more with the graduate student population, but I always like to talk about it now because it's something that I wish I had learned during college. But Anki allows you to make your own flashcards, and the way that their system is set up, it does allow you to kind of prioritize the information that you need to know, because you tell it how comfortable you're feeling with that topic. I also used it, especially in medical school, to make my own questions sometimes if I felt like I still wasn't learning a concept. So I'm going to repeat this one thing again, which is don't give up and always seek help. If you feel like you go into your first test and you're expecting to do well and then you don't do well, it's common to feel that way, but also it's really important to know that there's always help. There's always teachers and there's always advisors to kind of help you learn your best study strategies. So I just wanted to also thank y'all. Thank everybody at TAMS, especially Wendy and Russ and Sharon, Van, and Dr. Sinclair, who was our old bio teacher. But y'all have been an incredible community, and I'm really excited to help give back in this way. So we'll just stop for questions real quick.